They said women could not lead an army. I proved them wrong, not with words, but with war. In the bloody jungles of Vietnam, amid the roar of American helicopters and the endless hum of cicadas, one woman rose to become a legend. Her name was Nguyen Thi Dinh, farmer's daughter, revolutionary, and the only woman to hold the rank of general in the People's Liberation Armed Forces of South Vietnam. To her enemies, she was a ghost. To her comrades, she was Ba Dinh, a symbol of courage, defiance, and unbreakable will. This is not the story of an ordinary soldier. It is the story of a woman who fought empires and won. Nguyen Thi Dinh was born in March 1920 in a small coastal village of Ben Tre province, deep in the Mekong Delta, a place where the land bleeds into water and the air smells of salt and rice. Her family was poor, farmers, like most in Vietnam. The French colonial government taxed every grain of rice they grew. Her father, a humble man with strong ideals, would whisper stories of resistance as they worked the fields. "Someday, my daughter," he would say, "Vietnam will be free again. But freedom demands blood and courage." By the time she was a teenager, Nguyen Thi Dinh understood both. At age 16, she joined local demonstrations demanding land and independence. At 19, she was imprisoned by the French colonial police for organizing protests, beaten, humiliated, but never broken. Years later, she would recall, "They could chain my hands, but not my heart." That fire never left her. In 1945, the Japanese occupation collapsed with World War II's end. The chaos left Vietnam divided, the North inspired by Ho Chi Minh's communist ideals, and the South under French influence. Nguyen Thi Dinh, now 25, was among the first to organize women into armed revolutionary cells. She had no formal education, no military training. But she had something far more powerful, the trust of the people. She became one of the founders of the Southern Resistance Movement, known locally as the Nam Bo uprising. In 1946, when her husband, also a revolutionary, was captured and later executed by the French, Nguyen Thi Dinh made a vow before her comrades: "If my husband dies for the country, then I must live for it." From that moment, she became both soldier and symbol. By the early 1960s, the South was again at war, this time against the U.S.-backed Republic of Vietnam. And once again, Nguyen Thi Dinh was at the heart of the storm. She formed one of the most extraordinary forces in modern warfare, the Long-Haired Army, Joy Quan Tok Dai, an army of women. These were not trained soldiers. They were farmers, mothers, and young girls who turned their grief into strength. They carried rifles, knives, and sometimes only bamboo sticks, but they had unshakable discipline. Under Madame Nguyen's command, women became spies, messengers, medics, and even frontline fighters. They organized protests that disguised military operations, infiltrated villages occupied by American and South Vietnamese forces, and provided critical intelligence to the Viet Cong. In her memoirs, she wrote, "Our hair may be long, but our courage is steel. We fight not behind men, but beside them." The phrase spread across the Mekong Delta like wildfire. The long-haired army became both a symbol of defiance and a nightmare for the enemy. In January 1960, the Ben Tre uprising began, one of the earliest and most significant revolts in the Vietnam War. Nguyen Thi Dinh was its architect. Under her coordination, thousands of villagers, many of them women, rose simultaneously against government garrisons. They stormed police stations, seized weapons, and captured entire districts overnight. American advisors were stunned. One CIA report described the event as a spontaneous communist uprising led by women. But it was anything but spontaneous. It was carefully planned, down to the hour, by Madame Nguyen herself. The uprising spread like wildfire through the Mekong Delta. For the first time, the U.S. and South Vietnamese forces realized they weren't just fighting men in black pajamas. They were facing a nation in revolt. In recognition of her leadership, Nguyen Thi Dinh was promoted to Deputy Commander of the National Liberation Front, NLF, in 1965, effectively becoming the first female general in Vietnam's modern history. She was in her mid-40s, small in stature but formidable in spirit. Foreign journalists who met her described her as gentle in speech, ruthless in purpose. American military intelligence gave her the code name the Woman General. She didn't lead from an office. She led from the jungle, often sleeping in muddy trenches, sharing rice with her troops, and walking barefoot during long marches. Her soldiers adored her. They called her Mother Dinh, not out of age, but out of respect. When young fighters lost faith, she would sit with them by the campfire and whisper, "Don't fear the helicopters above. They can't see your heart. And that's where our victory begins." Her defiance came at a heavy cost. Entire villages were destroyed in retaliation for supporting her forces. She lost comrades, friends, and sometimes entire battalions overnight, but she never ordered her troops to surrender, only to adapt. In one intercepted U.S. military radio report from 1966, a commander said, "We hit them again and again, and yet they keep coming back. Whoever leads these people, she's a ghost." Indeed, Nguyen Thi Dinh mastered the art of survival warfare, moving her command posts constantly, disguising them as medical huts or even floating houses in flooded fields. She became as elusive as the wind. When the Tet Offensive erupted in 1968, Madame Nguyen played a key role in coordinating attacks across the Mekong Delta. It was the most ambitious operation of the war, a surprise assault that struck over 100 South Vietnamese cities simultaneously during the Lunar New Year ceasefire. Her female soldiers, the long-haired army, were instrumental in intelligence gathering and sabotage missions. They planted mines on convoy routes, smuggled ammunition, and guided main forces through swampy terrain. For weeks, the American command struggled to comprehend how the Viet Cong had planned such synchronized strikes. The answer lay partly in the invisible network Madame Nguyen had built, a web of women who carried messages hidden in rice baskets and codes woven into cloth. Even as the offensive eventually failed to hold territory, it broke the illusion of American control. And it cemented Nguyen Thi Dinh's reputation as one of the war's most brilliant guerrilla tacticians. By 1975, the war was ending. Saigon fell. The U.S. withdrew. Vietnam was finally united, but at a terrible cost. When the guns fell silent, Nguyen Thi Dinh was 55 years old. She had survived 2 wars, a husband's death, and decades of jungle life. Yet she bore no hatred. In her final years, she turned her focus to rebuilding, founding programs for war widows, veterans, and children. She became Vice President of Vietnam in 1987, the highest political office ever held by a woman in the country's history at that time. She never sought fame. When asked how she wished to be remembered, she said simply, "As a woman who did her duty to her people." She passed away in 1992 Age 72, buried not in a marble tomb, but beneath the same soil she once fought to free. Today, in her hometown of Ben Tre, children still learn her name in school books. Statues of Madame Nguyen Thi Dinh stand tall across Vietnam, not in victory poses but smiling, hands folded gently, symbolizing both compassion and strength. She proved that leadership is not born of power but of conviction. That courage knows no gender, and that sometimes the mightiest generals carry not a sword, but a mother's heart. If you want to know what courage looks like, one of her soldiers once said, look into the eyes of a woman who's lost everything and still chooses to fight. History often remembers wars through the men who waged them, but the soul of Vietnam's struggle was written by women like Nguyen Thi Dinh. She was not born a warrior, war made her one, and in her defiance she taught a nation to stand. I did not want to lead men into battle, she once said, but when men fell, someone had to stand where they stood. Her story is a reminder that heroism wears many faces, and sometimes it wears a smile, a daughter, a widow, a leader, the heart of a revolution.